Hi, Wood Floor Pros. This is Kim Walgren, the longtime editor of Wood Floor Business. This episode is part 2 of our conversation with AHF Products' Milton Goodwin and Tim Ryan. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I highly recommend you go back and listen to that first. If you have, let's dive right back in.
Question for both you folks. If a contractor's listening now on AHF and more about Bruce, what should they be looking for and paying attention to help build their careers?
If I were talking to a contractor and he was asking me, why do I need to know Bruce? First off, if you know Bruce, you don't need to know much of anything else. If you know what Bruce has to offer, you've got 95% of the market covered. We're going to cover you on warranty. We're going to cover you on service. We're going to cover you on manufacturing. We've got a technical team behind us to answer your questions. So if you're a new contractor and you have a question, you could either go to our website, you can pick up the phone and call our tech line. There's 100 ways that we can help you out. We supply the NWFA's training school with most of the wood that they're helping to.
They always have
to teach these folks. We're a big supporter of that. And if you were to tell your customer that you install Bruce flooring predominantly, they're going to be like, oh, perfect. I've heard of that. I know what that is. I'm comfortable with that. So I call it safe harbor. We're a safe harbor for wood, anything wood flooring, Bruce, any of our brands, but Bruce is a safe harbor that you can find what you need and be comfortable that it's going to be it's going to do what it says it's going to do. And it's going to be there long. We've been around longer than our warranties are.
And I would answer it a little differently, Steve. And I would say that I would say for them to consider that AHF really is rethinking hardwood from every angle. I mean, we were working hard to improve color technology, textures as we talk about finishes, and installation systems, which is really important to the contractor, and sustainability simultaneously. And, hardwood, while it may be one of this, maybe it's not the oldest flooring material, but certainly one of them. Maybe, stone was around in the Stone Ages, as they say, but that doesn't mean innovation has stopped with us. We're not reinventing hardwood. We're revealing what's possible with hardwood. And I think the one thing I found throughout my career on this side of the fence that I've learned over and over is that the best products tend to happen when design, manufacturing, marketing, sales, and the customer all have a seat at the table. Because then the result isn't just flooring. It's been proven that when manufacturing listens to customers and you work the technological kinks out, going back to the beginning of this conversation with glue down that works, that's tested. I mean, you get a lot of people out there, you'll see they're throwing out these claims about products, but they don't really have the testing to back it up. AHF has all of that done before it's ever out there. So they've, as Milton said, I think he used the words, it's a safe harbor for them. We're not guessing that this is going to work. We're really employing multiple resources to come out to solutions to problems. That my job is hopefully to make it as pretty, if not prettier, than the next guy, so that the designers love working with it and the contractors can merge their talents with the designers and the builders and the retailers, and the consumer gets exactly what they're looking for. I always say she doesn't want another floor. She wants a floor that turns her home into a showroom. And if we can turn a room into a showroom one at a time, then I've done my job. And Milton and the rest of the team that he directs on the backside, it's just all gonna work.
Tim, you're senior product designer, and you're talking my language. My job over the years has not been to just help give people advice. Is get me in early, get me before what could go wrong, because I know the answers to the test. We've seen them all. Ask me before you go do something, because when you're working with contractors like you are, you're talking about collaboration with a designer that's going to reduce your rework. It's going to eliminate the indecision. You're not going to have changed orders. Like you said, you don't want everybody in the cookie cutter neighborhood to have the same floor. You want them to go somewhere and go, where did you get this? Bruce makes that? Sure, they make that. They make different things. That's your gig, right?
Yeah, no, and I think what you said is brilliant, Steve, because to me, it's really the broader message about Design 101 and how when contractors, dealers, and designers share that And when that conversation happens early and are on the same page, it builds confidence throughout the entire supply chain from the top to the bottom to the consumer. The communication is better. And I've never found that that didn't lead to a better customer experience. And at the end of the day, you can have a great product, but if the customer experience wasn't good, then that's not a desirable outcome. And so getting them on the same page, I think is really, really important. And, contractors have a language and retailers have a language and designers have a language, but in my experience working with all three of them, they're really not that different. I mean, there's some things, and like I just did a seminar with a national group where they said, we really want to embrace designers, but we don't know how. And half of the crowd thinks they're just a pain in the rear and we don't want to work with them. And the other half says, we want to work with them, we just don't know how because we know that it leads to better jobs. And I said, one way that might show up is to try to understand how they think. It's really not that complicated. And that designers may choose color, texture, widths, and layouts for a specific reason. A wider plank, again, scale and proportion can make a room feel larger. And I try not to laugh when wide plank comes up and somebody says, oh, well, 9 inches is pretty wide. And I say, you're doing tile? Oh, yeah. Well, what are you doing in the kitchen? 12 by 24. And I'll kind of chuckle and say, so 12-inch wide by 24-inch tile is not out of proportion, but a 9-inch plank in a dining room might be too big.
Yes.
And so I think it's just, you have to kind of, again, it's changing the paradigm and get them to understand how, maybe these warmer tones connect the floor to the cabinetry and the furniture, because you've got complete remodels where they're changing all of that. And you've got other models where they don't. Internally, we kind of refer to those as legacy colors and then on-trend colors. They both have their place and you have to have them. And then how you flow through a room. I love herringbone, and it's kind of coming, I always say herringbone never went out of style. It was always in style. But again, it's cyclical. Well, it's starting to come back because it creates a focal point and a sense of movement. And when we can get all of those people to understand the why behind those decisions, communication improves, rework decreases, which is a big thing for everybody, and everyone stays aligned. And if we can play a part to helping contractors and dealers speak the same language with designers from day one, we're all going to have a better outcome. We just are.
They need to understand each other, especially when I have to go to a designer and say, we can't do what you want to do. What you want to do is going to create a technical nightmare, but let's work together on this. Because they all work for people with a lot of money, and they say, well, they have money, so just give it to them. And I can't do that.
And what I hear in that, and I think it's absolutely true, is they're both solving the same problem, but from a different perspective.
Correct.
In my experience with working with both is that the designers, usually they begin with the inspiration and the contractor's concerned with execution. They both have their place. There's no question about it. And a lot of times I'll have retailers or contractors say, if there was one question asked to a designer, what would that be to try to get on the same page from the beginning? And I would say, ask him or her, how do they want that space to feel? And they're going to tell you that. Going back to the technical side, which doesn't usually help solve a problem, but in this case it does, that, strip, plank, and parquet, there's technical descriptions for those, right? I come from the old NAFMA days where strip is defined as 3 inches or less in face width. Plank is 3 to 8. If it was wider than 8, they considered it siding. Yes, people put siding on the floor, and we don't consider that wrong. And then parquet, right, is pickets and pieces arranged to form a pattern. Yep. And I've had retailers say, but help me, why would that be important? I said, because, so I'll make up a scenario. Consumer comes into your showroom and they say, that's the color that I want, but I don't want grandma's wood floor. What she's telling you is she doesn't want strips, she wants plank, but she wants that color.
Sure.
Or if they say, well, I want that geometric, then they're looking for some sort of a pattern. Now you got to determine, is that chevron, is that herringbone, or is that actual parquet, even though herringbone technically is a parquet because it's pickets arranged in a pattern. But that's where, not because it's the technical side, but why strip may be what she's looking for or not. Or if they look at a plank floor and say, that looks too barn-like to me, I really like the interplay of color, then a narrower plank may be what they're looking for. But to your point, I've had some people say, yeah, but I don't want my living room to look like a basketball court. Well, we can look at different things to try to either minimize that or, accentuate that. Maybe in the man cave, that's what the guy's going for. But the wife probably doesn't want the living room to look like a basketball court.
You say that
these choices help us get to the right solution.
How does the texture and movement, even scale and pattern, affect the feel of a room? People don't always talk about the feel when you walk into a room.
Because again, I think, color helps set the mood, and then texture kind of how it feels. And, there's a big thing in both psychological and selling and in flooring now about tactile sensitivity and all of this. And that, feeling something that feels natural just connects with people in an emotional way. And I think that wood flooring is one of the few products that has the ability to do that. Because again, if we can get them to love that space, and again, I went back to how do you want it to feel? Warm or cozy or larger or smaller? And, a hand scraped floor of the same color and the same gloss would probably play off as rustic to a consumer. But if I did a gentle wire brush to it, it could come off as a modern cosmopolitan floor. So the only thing we've changed is the texture. So the texture has a big influence on how a room is actually going to feel. And not because the obvious texture, you feel it with your hands and your feet. And I've seen this play out literally hundreds of times, Steve's, in a showroom. And I've had carpet people say, yeah, it happens the same thing. They go up and they feel the carpet, they run their fingers through it. Then they never do that again.
Right.
But particularly at the premium level, I think how a wood floor feels creates the story, creates the mood, creates the connection to that floor. And I tell retailers all the time, have her touch it. Better yet, have him or her, whoever the consumer is, take their shoes off and put their feet on this floor and just feel what it feels like underfoot. It's relevant. It's important. Many times it can be the difference between something that feels plastic or contrived and something that feels natural. And again, there's still a place for hand scraped floors. For me, on a design side, I would say they're on the downward slope, but we still have areas that they're very, very popular. So we're still going to continue to offer them. But if that played off as too rustic, now we know maybe she wants a plank floor in a certain color with a certain gloss level where the hand scrape is playing off as rustic, but maybe she likes, I've kind of come up with a term I called, because I like analogies in my mind's eye, it works. Think of manicured antique. A piece of old furniture that you can tell it's not perfect. It's been lived on and loved, and it's experienced 50, 70, 100 years of life. I think to many people, that's authentic without being contrived, without being rustic. And so try to figure out what it is they're looking for. And I think we'll have the solutions there. And, a little bit of a squirrel moment, I almost forgot it. So we've actually played around. We're launching a finish now that's had good success with distribution. Again, Steve, doesn't affect performance, doesn't affect gloss, but we call it butter finish. It feels soft, almost like it would dent. But when you talk about tactile sensation and people feel this, I try really hard. I'm a big proponent of copying is intellectual laziness at its worst.
Right.
And our industry is full of people that just say, oh, we're just going to sit back and wait and see what sells and we're going to copy it. I'm not going to comment how negative I look upon that. But this is the one time we took a piece of a high-end furniture from a national furniture player and was talking to one of their designers by chance. This is hand-rubbed, high-end oil wax rub. The problem in flooring is most people don't want to rub wax on their floor anymore. Yeah. That was great-grandma's wood floor. If you tell a consumer today, well, I'm going to give you a bucket of wax and I'm going to give you this auric buffer, and it's really not that you've lost her. Almost 99 times out of 100. But I can tell you they love the way this hand-rubbed wax furniture feels. So we worked with the factory and challenged the coating supplier. I said, I don't know what the answer is. I just know we need to come up with a way to where our fortified finish feels like this. And I think we've nailed it, and we call it butter finish.
That's tactile.
So it just introduces it introduces another dimension to the story and the tactile and how this flooring feels. Because again, if the color creates the mood and the texture creates how it feels, now I can actually play with with texture, tactility in both the finish and physically by how much or how little we put on the floor. And it's almost, if you think about, that's just like a whole nother dimension that really is exciting to me.
You know what? I think you're bringing it together. This is we don't hear this often. This is coming together. It's that collaboration of designer, contractor, dealer, and smoother projects. Am I correct about that?
Designers often, and this is where it goes back to the retailer saying, how do we work with the designer to where it's not a problem, that it's a good thing? And I said, look, have you ever had somebody say, well, I'm not sure what the floor is going to look like, and it drives indecision? I said, designers, generally speaking, are very good at creating confidence for homeowners who struggle making final selections from small samples because they never fully represent how a floor will look in an actual space. And you can't have a sample big enough to show them what 3, 4, let alone 1,000 or 2,000 feet of flooring will look like. My experience has been that's where designers really help retailers and contractors get past that, because no homeowner or no customer in their right mind wants to write an $18,000 or $20,000 check and then walk in there and go, it is beautiful, but it's not really what I expected. And I think designers really help bridge that gap there.
I think you're absolutely right. Well, how does it, when you do that early alignment of these people, does it reduce all the indecision and change orders? I mean, how does, as a manufacturer, do you get to be involved in that designer? Is it by creating your products and your website to begin with? Is it by allowing people in the field like engineers, architects, designers to get a hold of your material and you tell them where to go find it? Like, how do you make sure these design people find a good distributor or a good place to get your products?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. For me, on the development side, I go out and I meet with a cross section of the market. You meet with people that do model homes. You meet with, believe it or not, I meet with people that are wood-only showrooms. Going back to my NWF day, I know a lot of Wood Floor of the Year winners. I know people, that's all they do. They don't sell tile. They don't sell laminate. They don't sell carpet. They only sell wood. And I think when you find commonalities between them and the architecture side and the design side, that signals to me that that's where that reveals to me probably where the market's going to be going. The trick is to not be too early, but I'd rather be too early than too late. I often say the windshield's a lot bigger than a rear view mirror for a reason. Right. History is important. Don't get me wrong. We need to know what's working and what's not working, but I think the windshield's bigger than a rear view mirror from a development standpoint, and that's where I tend to focus more time. But when you find commonalities amongst all of those, it tells me that I'm on the right path. But then after the fact is where you're right. Finding a way with technology now and dealer locators and other things to help them find the dealers that have the products that they're looking for. Or a lot of times Milton gets fed leads because somebody contacted the customer service desk. Sometimes they come to me, sometimes they go to Milton. And when it's really that, like we're working with a very well-known national high-end chain of hotels. I mean, one of these exclusive places where we're probably going to do 125,000 feet of flooring with them because we were able to be part of the beginning and speak the language on what they were trying to achieve with this project and what was forward leaning and what were we doing to accommodate that. So it's really a little bit of both, but Milton can probably dive into that more than me. But the marketing department and the way, the analytics of the website and where these things need to go to, we're definitely very active with that on the back side as well. I'm more on the foresight to make sure that we're hopefully steering the product innovation and development in the right direction. But even if arguably I did my job perfectly, if you don't execute that on the backside, then it may not fully see the light of day.
Sure. Milton, you want to jump in on any of this that we just...
Yeah, the comment that I'll make about the go-to-market and getting it in front of the consumers, we spend a lot of time and effort on our room scenes are the most critical part of our sample. We love what's on the front of the board, but showing the consumer what it's going to look like as best we can with the photography. So we take individual room scenes of every color. We don't do one room scene and then spread it across every product. So we do individual room scenes. We've got all that on our website. You can take your own room and plug in our products. And then it's getting with dealers and showing them the display. And we have multiple display options to get the product so that customer can hold the sample. QR codes to be able to order the sample directly from us and get the sample delivered to their home. We're doing that on the commercial side and on the residential side. And so giving as many touch point options as possible that we can think of in today's world, we think we've got them covered. But if there's somebody comes up with a different mousetrap on how to show it, well, we're open to that. But we are covering from take your own room scene, take a picture of your room and plug in your own product. You could do that on our website. The individual samples. I know that seems like every year the number of samples that we actually mail to people's home goes up. So this belief that people are picking offline and not ordering samples, I think is a myth. Because we're sending out a lot of individual samples for people to pick from. So and we're happy to do that. And then the distributors working with the dealers to get the right displays. And don't put a display in for the purpose of just putting a display in. Make sure that it fits your customer profile. I can't speak enough to that. Spending money on a display that doesn't get any sales is not doing anybody any good. So make sure that the clientele that you're catering to is a customer, is the samples that we're going to put in are the right sample for you. It doesn't do me any good to put a display into a dealer that's not fitting the customer clientele that they're catering to.
Sure.
Just so it's taking up space. It's not doing them or us any good.
You both think that, I see when I do get a chance to work with designers, one of the things people overlook is that they have the ability to explain to the consumer what better products, better outcomes, the value of the performance of a good product, how to make those choices. And I know I have a lot of really, really thousands of good hardwood flooring friends. And one might say, red oak and oil poly, that's all I use. If you get anything else, you're an idiot. Or others might say, well, I only do prefinished. I only use this brand. Designers seem to be able to open up the palette and say, here's your options, here's the budget, here's what we're doing. And don't you think that gives the consumer a chance, especially with Bruce products, to look at it and say, well, don't just look at Dundee. Let's look at Natural Choice. Let's look at all the selections that are available to you, because you have a much bigger portfolio than just a couple items that we've talked about.
I will say this on the designer side. Number one, they want to have multiple options for all their clientele, because one guy's building a $10 million house and the next guy's building a $500,000 house. And they might aspire to the same thing, but they may have to go in a different direction from a cost standpoint or what have you. And we can cover you on that. But I will tell you that the designers that, we deal with them all.
Sure.
Being able to say that I'm working with the manufacturer, when I talk about a safe harbor, I am working directly, because a lot of wood that's out there is just product that somebody bought off the shelf from a supplier somewhere on the earth. And you're not working with the manufacturer. You're just working with somebody that's reselling that product, and you can't even get a hold of the manufacturer. You don't know where it came from. That is not us. We are the manufacturer. We can take you to the plant. We can show you. We can tell you everything you wanted to know about that product, from almost in most cases from where it was grown to how it turned up in your floor. And designers love that. They love to be able to tell the story. Where did it come from? This tree came from West Virginia. It was cut down. It was crafted. It was handcrafted in a plant in West Virginia, or it was handcrafted in a plant in Tennessee or West Plains, Missouri. And we love telling that story. And the designers love to be able to say, yeah, we work with Bruce. They manufacture their products in these plants. And that's very comfortable for people.
This episode is sponsored by AHF Products. AHF is raising the bar with Bruce Natural Choice Solid Hardwood, which is made in the United States using Appalachian lumber. Paired with the Summit Select adhesive system, it makes glue-down installation over concrete easier by eliminating moisture and pH testing, helping reduce callbacks and saving time. Add expanded unfinished options and stylish low-gloss finishes, and you've got products built for today's flooring professionals. Learn more from AHF Products and see what's new for your next project at ahfproducts.com.
You can create a very artistic palette in someone's home way different than we used to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no question about it. The way that stain formulations can be layered, particularly in the factory level, because we primarily are using UV systems to where we can instantly dry and put another color on top. And the analogy I use with people is, red and green, you can say, well, that's going to make it's going to make a brown color, right? In paints if you mix the two together. And I'm not suggesting somebody wants to see red and green, but just like with glass, if I put red glass behind clear glass, you see the red. If I put green behind that, you would see the red and the green. With the way we're able to layer colors on the industrial level with the systems we use, we can layer colors. And that's where understanding the layering of color, there's a lot of things we can do with red oak to minimize the red. And it is kind of coming back. But you're right. Historically, there was a time nobody wanted white oak. Everybody wanted red oak. And then it kind of started to change. I mean, when I first got in the business, you'd probably remember, Steve, red oak was more expensive than white oak.
Yes. Yeah.
Because it was desirable.
Sure.
And then as those trends changed from 1988, 89, 91 into where we're at now, it just goes over. And you're right. I think predominantly in the natural state, red oak is a little bit too red for many people, but not for all people. I think when you get up into more of that Boston area, the last time I was there, most of those houses, they've got natural red oak floors throughout.
Almost everything was. And if you ask anybody up here, they'll say their favorite floor is a white oak floor because they're so sick of seeing the red. It's everywhere. Prefinished has come a long way from, remember the days people would go, oh yeah, I know prefinished. That stuff's junk. Not anymore.
Yeah, today's pre-finished floor is arguably far more durable and far more sophisticated than it was 15, 20 years ago. And in some ways, I'd say the cost has actually come down. I mean, I remember when, 2004, 2005, 5-inch long length hand scraped engineered wood floors at the wholesale level were in the $6.50, $7 a foot. We're arguably selling products with far better adhesive systems, no added formaldehyde, multi-layered colors with oxidative colorants for below that price. And so, and I think sometimes that's a challenge for the industry. I don't think there's a lot of industries that can say they've made a product that's better, faster, and cheaper this year than it was 5 years ago. Prices of cars, prices of computers go up. But I think you could argue in our industry, there's been some players out there that I think have done a disservice by driving price down, where the consumers used to be willing to pay more for these quality products. And I think a consumer is getting a better product now for less money than they did 15 years ago.
Tim, do you think that designers help prevent issues and save money, and that they know how to put all that, the cost, the value, the design element all together? Is that what they're trained to do?
Wouldn't say they're trained to do it, and sometimes with hardwood, because the technical aspect, maybe not be aligned with the design or the aesthetic aspect. And I think that's where maybe some retailers and contractors have had some bad experiences. And so I think there is an opportunity there with some of them to educate them on some of those unique differences of the product itself. But I would say as a general rule, yeah, they do help streamline that, and they help, solve some of these problems down the road. Like I say, I think being on the same page early on, because I think they're all working towards a solution, but from a slightly different angle. And I think when they can get in the room together and talk about those and get in alignment, I think far more often than not, the outcome is better than, getting in the quagmire. But, sometimes color is important. Don't let me get, to me, it's all about the color, and, nature's inspiration is really my starting point, just because if you say, how do you come? There are no new colors. Nature has every color we're ever going to need. If we do her justice, we're going to come up with something good. It's really aligning that with the direction of the marketplace, setting aside the really high end that they don't care where the market's going. They want what they want. And so we have some products that really are geared towards that, to where we throw it out. We've played with pearlescence. We played with metallics. And again, it's one of the beauties. I can get as crazy as I'm willing to do. I won't use the language, but Milton is wonderful from this standpoint. He's often said, Tim, I want something that people are going to walk away from the booth at services saying, oh my God, did you see that? And not because we necessarily think that we're going to sell a lot of it, because I think there's value into the exercise of stretching and saying, what can we do? We even played around with, if you remember when in the automotive industry, and Ford was big on this with PPG, where from the front of the Thunderbird, it was purple, from the side, it was aquamarine, and from the back, it was yellow or orange. We played around with a floor that as you walked around it, it changed colors.
Wow.
And we can't, you can't show this in a blog, but I've been at some high-end designer conferences. Well, they'll look at that and they walk around and they are so intrigued. And there's a time and a place for that. But I think just demonstrating that you're willing to think outside of the box and that the company is willing to allow the design and the innovation side to think outside of the box, there's a lot of benefit to that because it leads to things. For instance, Milton talked about pure tone. The challenge I had for the factory was we knew we needed to defeat green. We knew we needed to defeat paint tones. And, back in your day, it sounds like you did a lot of custom site finishing. We'd use an A and a B bleach. Well, by today's standards, it's not very environmentally friendly. It kind of messes with the lignin. You can argue it really kind of does some undesirable things to the surface of the wood, but it does some really good things for the canvas, as Milton refers to it, and I refer to it. So it was, we need this outcome in something that's not harsh chemistry, that's repeatable, that's sustainable, that is not, bad for the environment. And that's where it started. And we ended up with this product that we call Pure Tone that we've trademarked. And it's a remarkable way, Steve. If I put particularly what I call raw organic lights, if I put a piece of unfinished 4mm or 3/4-inch European white oak or American white oak, there's a lot of designers and consumers, they want that raw, unfinished look. But as you know, as soon as you put finish on it, a little bit of green might come out, a little bit of whatever's there, it's going to magnify it. I could show you 2mm sliced white oak, whether it's American white oak or European white oak, and I could put it next to a dry sawn lumber, and we put an invisible sealer on it to where when we put the finish on, it didn't change color. If I hid the thickness from you, Steve, I don't think you'd be able to tell me which one was sliced and which one is sawn. And to some extent, I would almost dare I say, that's kind of a holy grail in the hardwood industry to be able to make those products look the same. And so, but not using a 2-part bleach because that's just not an efficient way for us to do things at scale.
No.
And it's not good for the employees. It's not really good for the wood, where we've got an environmentally friendly way that's sustainable. It's a bio-based solution is Pure Tone. And it really enables us to do some things on sliced veneer. We sometimes use it on sawn veneers too, because it's almost a lightening agent without using diluted white, because white will do some pretty interesting things to wood, as you know, if you dilute it, but it also it clouds it a little bit and it starts to look a little bit painted. And now there's a place for farmhouse. There's no question about it. But if you're trying to get raw organic lights and maintain incredible depth and clarity, adding white pigment isn't really the best way to do it. And Pure Tone solved that problem for us.
You said it, the holy grail. I think the holy grail in flooring, and it always will be, is how big, how large, and where are the bevels? And I tell people all the time, for the people that say, oh, I don't want engineered, it's junk. No, the closest you're going to get to the look of a site sanded and finished is going to be with an engineered. That's where the ability is to keep the floor stable enough that it can be milled tight and flat, that you can get that little pinched edge, not the old Bruce bevel or the micro bevel or the regular bevel, but a simple pinched edge. And I think that also gets people to say, oh, I don't have my house all messed up by sanding and finishing, and this looks beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The downtime, if you're talking about to a developer or in a commercial space, the lack of downtime is simple finance, right?
Sure.
It costs money to take that retail store down. It costs money to not be able to turn that hotel room. It costs money to tell every trade in a custom house, keep your you-know-what out of this house for the next 7 days. And so engineered floors come a long ways. And again, AHF offers both of them. And I'll often have people say, okay, Tim, what do you have in your house? I can have whatever I want in my house. I happen to have an engineered wood floor. Why? Because I wanted 7.5-inch wide, long length, dry sawn look with just natural. So really no color. I have a Pure Tone floor in my house because I think it's an absolute ultimate neutral, that I can do anything in my house. I could bring in a designer friend. We could do anything we wanted to do if it got outside of my comfort level, and that floor will just never go wrong.
When you mentioned light, if you take any floor, 9 o'clock in the morning looks one way, noontime another. The rest, if it's a dark color like a gun stock, rest of the day it just looks like a deep dark brown floor. However, the thing that is different in the last decade is the lighting. People have, it's just, I had a lamp in the living room. No, now people have canister lighting and halogen lighting and overhead lighting. I know a guy that actually on a job has a special light in different spectrum so he can actually show his customers what the difference is going to be. And I think going back to what you do, designers help in one big way. A lot of people cannot look at color and discern what's going on. A lot of people cannot think in pictures and visualize ahead. A lot of engineers are like this. They need to see it all. They'll build a whole room and go, no, we got to change it. It's a designer can build that, right? They can help do that.
Yeah. Well, and I talked about earlier, lighting and how we could do a whole segment on that. You're right. I mean, lighting's come a long way. Old fluorescent bulbs were very yellow, very warm, very ambering. And with oil modified finishes, it was amber on top of amber. People like that look to where, I won't go into the whole thing here because it would take too long. But I tell a story, and it's a real story when I'm talking about with the retailers and the designers and the effect of lighting. About consumers have so many choices now. Go into one of the big boxes and they have a little box where they show you 25, 35, 45, 55, 6. It's called Kelvin scale. And there's a color rendering index. And you need to know and you need to understand those. Suffice it to say, I saved, because I had a knowledge of this that I learned from somebody that really understood this. And I said, this is huge. I can't believe this doesn't get talked about. To where I have one of those light meters and I'll show people a sample and I'll run it from 2500 to 6500 and the color changes dramatically. And I had a very high-end customer one time in a high-end ski resort community that they installed about 5,500 feet. They flew in on their private jet and said, this is a beautiful floor, but it's the wrong color. It's got to come out. They swore up and down that they was the wrong color floor. And so they called me in and I said, and it was with somebody you may have known in your former life inspections, Roy Reichow, and we got to talking about this. And what it was is the lighting that they picked that sample in the design center was different than the lighting in the house. And so I changed the lighting and I said, you don't need a new floor. You need $400 or $500 worth of light bulbs and the floor is going to look exactly like what she picked before. They literally looked at me like I was smoking something. And I said, let me show you. That floor was saved by changing the light bulbs, not by changing the floor.
I can walk into Lowe's and look at the color chart. I see my wife over there, 50 aisles away, and I go, she's in the wrong section. She's going to pick a white linen, and I see her, and she's in the violet section. Yeah. We had a neighbor that did this big, beautiful house in our neighborhood. Beautiful. They did it white. It looked so pretty. I'm telling you, it had a pond, just for everybody that's listening. And I said to my wife, this is the biggest mistake. She goes, I'm not getting into it. Anyway, first snowfall comes. What color do you think that house was? Pink. They chose the white out of a gallon section, out of the cards that was in a pinkish violet section and didn't even know it. So once the snow around the house was white, you could see it was a pink house. They had to repaint it the next year.
Everybody learns from mistakes, and the designers, they've seen what's successful. They know what works. Your odds of making a mistake if you have a designer are dramatically reduced because they have probably done maybe not your particular home or your particular business, but they've done something similar and they know the pitfalls that they can steer you away from.
Well, like you said, Steve, I've had the same thing. It sounds like you've had where you say, we love the way the floor looks when the sun sets over here coming through that window, but I don't like the way it looks in the morning. Again, the easy fix is changing the lighting. I can make your lighting make that floor look like it is in the afternoon sun and the morning sun. And if there's one thing that I think it can be a contractor, designer, or retailer that I've spent, sometimes I've spent as much as 30 minutes in a 1-hour seminar on using that light meter and showing them the profound effect in understanding what lighting are you showing in your showroom. To me, when everybody asks me, I'd say 5K. You should have 5K in your showroom if for no other reason it doesn't change the color. It would be neutral.
Sure.
And then they said, well, but what if they don't have 5K in their house? I said, they may or they may not. But if the point is you want to see the true color of the sample, that's 5K. If I go down to 2,500, it's going to be warm. If I go all the way up to 6,500, it's going to be lighter. So at 5,000, that basically replicates natural sunlight. And so it doesn't make the color warmer or cooler. It's neutral. And so I say, at least if you start there, then you can work warmer or cooler from them as opposed to starting warmer. And then they get in their house with the 5K. Then that's when you get the phone call. This doesn't look like the sample that I picked. And you go out there and you put the sample on the floor and it looks right. And they think somebody's done something to switch and bait with them. It's the wood didn't change color. The lighting changed.
I'm going to ask you just a couple really simple questions and I will let you escape. But these are more geared for some of the things people might want to pull away from this and feel free to both answer however you feel like. Where is wood flooring design heading like in the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you see design in what you do for your company heading in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, for me, I think it's hardwood becoming more human. I think for years, our industry has been focused, me included, on specification. I think to today's savvy consumer, that's blah, 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 blah. Why this product is better than that product, blah, blah. In my vision, I believe Milton and AHF shares it. Milton has a whole different perspective on the business than I do because Milton's got to look at everything from 35,000 feet. I have the luxury of looking at innovation from a design standpoint, but it's that we're focused on the experience. I don't think people fall in love with a floor because it's a certain gloss level or a board width. I think those are contributing factors. I think they may have a certain specification to start for, but I think more than likely they choose a floor because how it makes them feel every time they walk into that room. And so creating a connection along with really trying to do homage with nature, which is where I start, I think that's what excites me. And I hope the industry as a whole goes in that direction.
I would say over the next 5 years, what I see that is happening, and I work for a company that is we sell all kinds of flooring. I hear it every day. And the reality is that the product that has taken the most lion's share of hardwood is vinyl plank flooring.
Right.
Vinyl plank flooring is 10 years old now. So that shine on that apple is not what it was. And it's not this, it's a great product. Don't get me wrong. It serves a purpose. And we sell a lot of plank flooring. And we have a factory that makes vinyl plank flooring. But as the wood guide, what I'm seeing is people like, I had that other product and it didn't really, it wore out and it didn't look good. And I had a wood floor once and I never got tired of that wood floor. And so what I think is going to happen is I think that we are going to work our rear ends off to make sure that our product remains competitively priced, that it doesn't go up in price. And so engineered wood was the first innovation in keeping price where it is. Other things that will happen will be improvements. We already have waterproofing on wood. Water is the Achilles of wood.
Absolutely.
And so you'll see waterproofing on wood continue to be a part of it. The adhesives industry will become more foolproof. I wouldn't be surprised if there wouldn't be an adhesive where you can put it down and pick it back up and use it again coming down the road. So I'll let the adhesives industry, take care of that. And from a design standpoint, everything went wider. I don't pretend to have a crystal ball on where we're going to go in design. The designers of the world will take us down that path and we will be prepared to make whatever that is, whether it's wider now. I got a phone call today asking me, why don't we make 2-inch boards anymore?
Great.
So I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? I don't pretend to win a guess. I think that naturals will be forever, and wood is a natural product. When Tim talks about driftwood and staying with nature, there is nothing in my being that makes me believe we're going to be deviating from that.
One last question. So is there anything you can tell me that a flooring contractor could do to go out, meet, understand designers, get their business card in there? Because listen, there's something I've taught for decades. Don't forget the hardwood flooring contractor. Somebody has to put this stuff in. How do we get a hardwood flooring contractor to think about designers, go meet them, talk with them, and work together?
if they don't have a showroom, probably they're working with people that are working with some. And I would just say, hey, I'd like to be part of these conversations. But, most localities will have an ASID chapter or they have these other chapters, or Lux Magazine is another big one. And from my perspective, there's always events going along. And I would just encourage them to go to one of those and look and observe and ask questions and then start to get involved. And I think that they may find that they'll have a pretty good partner there that can augment their business in a direction that they're not currently getting. And it would be a way to expand the business. And it's like everything, there's Chevy, Buick, and Cadillac, right? But I think as a general rule, right, we shouldn't generalize, but we do. Generally, the people that are working with designers are buying more of a premium product. And I think most people would like a larger portion of their business to be premium versus a commodity. So I think it naturally lends itself in that direction.
I would tell a young guy or girl that's, first off, the flooring install trade is phenomenal. You can make a fantastic living doing it. So I would say if you're coming up through the ranks and you're learning how to put the products in, and you're going to become a qualified installer, and then you're going to own a store and take it to whatever level that you want to take it to, make sure you're documenting along the way the steps that you're doing. I went and took an NWFA installation class. I worked this summer with my dad, but document it so that when you're talking to that designer and you go, well, how do I know that you're, who I want to install my floor? Well, let me tell you why I'm that person. This is all the things that I did along the way. I'm not telling you to put a scrapbook together, but I am telling you to put a scrapbook together, maybe use some modern technology to do it, and be proud of that. And then tie yourself to people. I'd like to say, we're talking about our company, but tie yourself to legitimate manufacturers like Bruce, Hartco, Robbins, so that when you have a problem, and you will have a problem somewhere along the way, you're going to pick up that phone and you're going to call that company, and they're going to be right there for you. They're going to stand behind you, and you're going to say, I did everything right. And, do we ever screw up? Yeah, sometimes we do. And if we screw up, we fix it. And if you played the game with us, you're covered. We got you covered.
Boys, I got to thank you. You said it all. You're brilliant guys. Maybe we do this 3 times. We don't have a 3-timers club yet. I don't like to call Milton a 2-timer, but he's a 2-timer.
I'll take that as a compliment.
All right. Well, thank you, folks. I really, really, really appreciate the time. It's always good. And this is a whole other level for people to listen to. Thank you. And let's talk again sometime.
Thanks, Steve.
Have a good evening. Bye, guys.
Thank you to AHF Products for sponsoring this episode of All Things Wood Floor. You can find more information about AHF's Spruce Natural Choice and all AHF products at ahfproducts.com, which is also in the show notes for this episode.